Right now, the systems we've created are institutionally focused, right? You get, for example, student A, me, I go and I sign up for a course and I sign up on someone else's system and I give them all my data and I log into their system, I do the work there. When I leave, they take everything away, right? Unless there's some clean export, but there isn't. And it's lost. So my experience as a student where I'm doing some of my best thinking and I've had 4 or 5 years to really focus my thinking, in some ways is lost unless I'm backing everything up on my own space. An effective learning environment, in my mind, completely inverts that model. It basically has a student sign up to a central system by letting that system access its data. So that student is saying, you can get everything I write on this blog. You can get my personal information for anything you got to send me. You can use this email to communicate with me. So that student becomes the center, and the system at the university becomes the hub where they can access it for X amount of time. And that's not just about education. That should be about our medical records, our police records, our data, electricity usage, whatever it was. What if we reverse the model so that a system for learning was about pulling in and aggregating student data that they let us use and they kind of agreed to, rather than everything going in a system that they don't eventually get. So this idea is a spoke system where every student has their own hub on the web that feeds into the system, but also they can take everything they go. And they can publish wherever they want. And we have the technology through APIs to feed it in so that it can be, their post can be right next to their colleague's post or another student's post, and it can sit in what's called a course site that's just temporary. But the idea that we're still using these centralized systems that takes all this student work and effectively puts it there and does allow for some grading and allow for maybe some interaction, but eventually uses the student as a kind of pawn in a game of chess to manage, rather than thinking about the student and the work they've done as a kind of digital citizen, that this is a part of their stay, but then not starts at education, but maybe moves well beyond to every facet. And there's a movement in Finland, and it's broader, it's called My Data, and it's about rethinking the rights, digital rights of an individual. So when someone does, you do sign up for a Google account, and Google does sell your information. Why shouldn't you be notified, A, Google's selling your information to company X, and B, I want to get a piece of it. So if you feel like A, you can sell it, but B, you should pay me X amount. Or C, don't sell it. Or D, you can sell it freely, I don't care. But what if we actually started to change the rules around whose data was where and why? And I think when we talk about learning environments, what we're often talking about is aggregating student data, right? Because our learning environments are exhausts of what students have done. So if that's the case, why are we not rethinking the very premise of a system to be student-centered? I mean, there's so much talk about student-centered, but if you look at all of our systems, none of them are. And I don't think it would be that hard. There's something called the Personal API. One of the projects I'm working on called the Domain of One's Own, which is at least early stages. It's by no means complete, but early stages of thinking about what if a student controlled, or a faculty member or a staff member controlled a bit of the web where they manage, and then they decided what gets shared and what doesn't. I really think it would rethink the very kind of premise of how we're doing business systemically as higher ed. And it would allow students to build and manage their thinking about what they're doing, not only as a course, but as a course of thinking and reflecting upon who they are, that lives both as part of the university but beyond. It's a little bit idealistic, but it's technically very possible. It's actually technically doable. I think culturally it's still a huge, but I think that's sad, because we've been in the wake of Web 2.0, in the wake of redefined kind of disruption after disruption, not all good. But in terms of higher ed, like, we've done very little to rethink our relationship to how students frame who they are. We talk about e-portfolios. We talk about, like, assessments. We talk about personalized data. We talk about all these things, personalization. But the technology has been there forever. It's not going to, it was there with the HTML, it's there with the blog. I mean, having a student reflect and think and share the work they do and give them control over it is not an impossibility. It's very simple. But, you know, we still find ourselves stuck in an LMS.